All right, I think we're going to get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ripples and Student Reps School Board Candidate Forum. My name is Sadie Cumberbatch. I'm a senior and one of 3 student representatives currently serving on the Shorewood School Board. We have 2 candidates tonight, Ellen Eckman and Traci Clark. They are running for 1 seat in an election that will take place on April 6th. So before we begin, I would like to introduce my fellow student reps as well as the Ripples Editorial Staff.
Hi, my name is Jack Stolmacher. I'm a senior at Shorewood High School, and this is my 2nd term as the student representative on the school board.
Hi, my name is Alexis. I am a sophomore, and this is my 1st term as a student representative on the school board.
Hello, my name is Shannon. I'm a senior, and I am the current features editor and business manager of Ripples.
My name is Laura. I'm a senior, and I am the managing editor of staff, the features editor, and a social media editor for Ripples.
Hi, my name is Sophia. I'm also a senior, and I'm also the social media editor as well as the arts and entertainment editor for Ripples.
I'm Abby. I'm a senior. I am the editor-in-chief as well as the sports editor for Ripples.
I'm Ethan. I'm a junior, and I'm the news editor.
Hi, I'm Sophie. I'm also a junior, and I'm a copy editor.
Hi, I'm Noe. I'm also a junior and a copy editor.
Hello, I'm Mr. Jordan, and I am the advisor for Ripples. And thank you, student reps, for the opportunity to partner with you all in this forum.
Thank you for allowing us this opportunity, Mr. Jordan. For the first hour to hour and 15 minutes, the editorial staff will be asking the 2 candidates questions. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer, and the order of first response will alternate for each question. Throughout the Ripples mandated part of the forum, the everyone chat feature will be disabled for all participants, and Jack will be broadcasting how much time is left, and this will show up in the top center of your screen. You shouldn't have to monitor the chat for that. And then we do ask that everyone stays muted for the entire time that the editorial staff is asking questions. After that, there will be time for students to ask questions. Finally, we do ask that any promotional materials for either candidate are not displayed. Editorial staff, over to you.
Thank you, Sadie. Really quick, I'm just going to spotlight both of the candidates so everyone will be able to see them. And before we start, I do want to say that the questions you are about to hear, asked by all of us on the editorial staff, were thought of, written, and approved of as a group. So even though the editors will be taking turns asking the questions, someone asking a question does not necessarily mean that they wrote it. So kind of just keep that in mind. And then once again, just thank you to Ellen, thank you, Traci, for both taking this time to meet with us. We're very excited. So with that, we will start off with opening statements. So if you both could just introduce yourself briefly, state why you are running, and then just as a reminder, you do have 90 seconds. And then for this first question, we are just gonna go alphabetical by last name. So Traci may speak first, and then from here on out, we will just rotate the order. So Traci, take it away when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Hi, I'm Traci Clark, and I'm running for school board. I want to say thank you to Ripples and the Shorewood School Board student reps for hosting this event. The first thing I want you to know about me is that I believe in putting students first, always. We moved here for the schools and fell in love with the community. I have 2 kids who are both at Lake Bluff. My youngest is in 4K and my oldest is in 4th grade. So I'm invested in the district. I have over 20 years of experience in education. And for the last 15 years, I've been a teacher in both online and traditional face-to-face classrooms at MATC. Education is all about growth, and I decided to run for school board because of the opportunity for growth in clarity of communication at all levels of the district, ensuring a learning environment that is reflective of the 21st century expectations that our students face, increased accountability and transparency, and the need for a comprehensive plan to deal with the aftermath of this year's challenges so that families and students continue to choose Shorewood schools. All these are important for rebuilding trust in the district and ensuring that today's students receive the Shorewood experience that the district is known for. So I'm very excited to be here today to answer your questions, but also to listen and to learn. And I'm very grateful for this opportunity. I'm looking forward to our conversation tonight.
And then Ellen.
Okay, sorry, technical difficulty. It wouldn't unmute easily. Well, I am delighted to meet with all of you and give you thanks for organizing this. It's not an easy task to just quickly to organize it. I know you put a lot of work into it. Your first part of your question, I believe, was asking why I decided to run for the school board. And I think it goes to the very heart of who I am as a person. I always believed in the importance
All right, thank you. So our first question, oh, Shannon shared the doc with some of the terms. So our first question tonight is, what makes Shorewood schools unique and how do you plan to preserve this? Ellen, we'll start with you.
well, I don't know if there's a number of things that make Shorewood unique. We can start with the very, very talented staff and teachers that have been attracted to work here in Shorewood. But I think we would be remiss if we didn't also talk about the curriculum and the staff and the administration working to always keep that curriculum as a cutting edge curriculum. This is a high performing school district. It always has been, and it is my intent that it should continue to be a high performing school district. But it's also very sensitive to new things. It hasn't allowed itself to become so ingrained that it isn't open to new endeavors. I was looking at the course content, and though there are many courses that were in the social studies department when I was there, they also have new ones and new names, likewise in some of the other departments. And that shows the ability to grow. I know that authentic learning has become an important component in Shorewood. I know that being able to get into the community is very important, as seen by the three representatives on the student, from three student representatives on the school board. We might ask if we could get some student representatives in village government. We have a couple of student representatives on the Human Resource Committee in the village, but we need student input in lots of areas. So I think those are the kinds of things that make Shorewood a very exciting place to be and a wonderful group of students to work with.
Thank you. Traci, we'll have you next.
Yes, I think that the easy answer to that is the students really, and what you all represent and bring to the community and to your own ownership of your learning environment. I have seen on multiple occasions, and I love that the district celebrates your accomplishments during different aspects of social media. That as a community member with younger kids, I don't have that kind of connection that students get to participate in. It's something that drew us to the district, the opportunities for, as Ellen said, wonderful, renowned academic experience, but also the approach to learning that is innovative and collaborative. And that we're a destination district for teachers because of that opportunity that is created through the approach to learning that teachers and students bring together and create in the district. It's very unique. And then we have things that we, as an English teacher, the celebration of liberal arts and a well-rounded curriculum of opportunities for students in like Ripples and orchestra and athletics, and just the breadth of the experience that Shorewood offers and that you all take advantage of and celebrate and represent the community well with. I also think that approach, oh, that's my time, is valuable. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is, on the flip side, what is your biggest critique of the district and what areas could be most improved? We'll have Traci start with this one.
Sure. I mentioned a couple of areas for growth that I think are important. And I think that particularly in communication is a room for growth. Because, as I said, the district does a good job celebrating the accomplishments of the district and the students, but we also want to make sure that there's different forms of communication that are clearly expressed. So you have that external level of communication, but there's also like a middle ground of the communication where it's partially external or partially internal, and that's the communication that goes to parents and also to students. And then there is the internal communication that goes to teachers. And so it's really important that those types of communication have a really smooth flow to them, because always then pieces of information can get left out. And so it's what we want to make sure that we're fostering a clear communication channel so that students feel that they have an awareness of what's going on officially, and not just on the side, like in back in the days when we had hallway conversations, right? And as you guys are getting the opportunity to have those again, so that that social media rumor type of communication is not the front and center, but that we have solid structures of communication and that we're on this page. Parents, teachers, students, community are all on the same page.
Thank you. Ellen?
I'm sorry, I'm having a delayed reaction on opening my mute, but at least I remember to do it. I always like to think of two things, because you use the word a critique of the district and also areas to improve. And what we talk about more on the educational, at the schools of education, is that we don't talk about weaknesses of a school district or a critique, but we think of opportunities. What opportunities can we do to improve things? One of the things that's going to be extremely important as we're moving forward, and which Shorewood has already begun, is the movement around the equity issue. And it's certainly the case that the current events that are happening as we speak today speaks to the fact that we need to be really reaching out and helping students and helping the community deal with people from all kinds of minority groups. The attacks on African Americans, on Asians, on Hispanics, on LGBTQ, on Muslims, and increased anti-Semitism are all areas that we need to help our students deal with and help the people who are affected by it and move and improve that. I think another thing that's really going to be important is mental health issues. That as students are coming back, there's a tremendous amount of stress and tension, and we're going to have to be very sensitive to that and very ways to help, in emphatic ways to help students and staff deal with this pandemic and the losses that occurred in all kinds of areas. And I think those are opportunities that we can also grab to improve the district.
All right, thank you. Our next question is, what actions do you believe should be taken surrounding the racial achievement gap at Shorewood, and what do you propose should be done at a district level? We will start with Ellen for this question.
Okay, actions on the racial achievement gap. I think one of the first things we're going to have to do, and I believe that's very much what's coming out of the training that is going on. They call it the ICS training, is do an equity audit, which will help us really understand in what areas are we seeing the gaps, and what do they look like? If we want to just say the word gap, or what do they mean? Are they in reading? Are they in mathematics? Are they in language learning or world languages? Things like that. We have to identify them. Or are they in discipline? And then we really have to know what's happening. If we're talking on the district level, we really have to look at when children, and the youngest children, what kind of vocabulary level are the children coming in with? How much reading has been going on? How are they getting that kind of verbal language skills that are so important as you move through a school district, as you move through school? At the other end, I think we have to be sensitive and not characterize and not exclude students from trying different classes. That has often been a case, and I know that one thing that Shorewood did when I was there is that students were not kept out of courses like anthropology if it was a weighted course, as long as you knew that you were going into a more difficult class and you were willing to take it. We have to make these opportunities, we can't exclude people from courses that will be very helpful for them in the future. So those are just a few things. I think working together, we can find other ways to address some of the issues.
All right, thank you. And Traci?
Yeah, when we're talking about the achievement gap, I think it's really important to reframe it as an opportunity gap. I think that's more descriptive of what we're actually seeing. And that I think it's important that we don't fall into a false perception that pits standards against diversity. That's not our values in Shorewood, and it's just not true. We all want the students in Shorewood to have the best possible education, and standards are an important part of that process, but it's the opportunity to meet those standards and the fairness and how those standards are assessed that needs to be the focus in order to ensure that there's not an opportunity gap. I'd like to see multiple measure approach rather than any high stakes standardized test. And of course, we don't want to be teaching to the test. I'd like to see the standardized tests, if used as a double check with an early warning intervention potential when compared to other measures. In this context, a standardized test, which can be known to create those opportunity gaps, then would be a double check on the district rather than any one student's or group of students' performance. And that would ensure that the overall standards of the district remain high quality, but that the opportunity for all students to have the opportunity to excel in our district is intact.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is, how will diversity in our curriculum be prioritized? And as an important facet in achieving more diversity, what steps will be taken in hiring more faculty of color? And we'll have Traci go first.
I think it's really important to take, on an interdisciplinary approach to making sure that the curriculum is reflective of the student's experience, expectations, and is current and reflective of all members of the student body and population. It's really important that students are hearing from different voices and that's reflected in different subject matters. As an English teacher, I can talk to the importance of being able to create that relatability and not just the curriculum, but then the delivery of what is chosen and by teachers, and to have students have input in that and have that be something that is delivered through that lens. I think that diversity needs to be built into the curriculum to ensure that that occurs. So putting measurable components to the curriculum that I've had experience building myself at MATC ensures that that is not left up to interpretation, but that no matter as you go throughout the grades in the district, that you have that built into the subject matters, and that's just not like lumped off into a certain class, but that it's interdisciplinary and woven throughout the curriculum so that the delivery in the classroom is felt.
Okay, yeah, now we'll have Ellen go.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you were ready for me. All right, so there were two questions in here. One is the diversity in the curriculum and the question on hiring a more diverse faculty and staff and administration. Let me take the second one. So they're both equally important. Hiring a diverse faculty should be a front and center, and it requires a very, very strong recruitment program. Attracting teachers into the field right now, as I'm saying this from my professor hat in the teacher education program, is more difficult. People are choosing other occupations, and we need to attract people to the teaching field. There are some school districts doing Grow Your Own, where they really help their own students think about coming back to them. So we're going to have to do some major recruitment. We're going to have to look at recruiting in more than just the schools and universities here in our city. We're going to have to go a little further. We may have to have visits to historically Black colleges and universities and really get at that. For diversity in the curriculum, I think a lot of it is the kind of, let's take social studies, my field. What kind of things are we reading? What's in the history? Have we got the Japanese internment camps? Are we reading John Lewis's March? Are we considering gender, race, social class in materials that we present? What part of history are we not including? And as the state legislator is looking at the Holocaust Education Act, how are we going to incorporate that in our curriculum? Because that will be required if it passes the legislature. And any of those things will be very important to work with students and teachers on this kind of curricular infusion.
Thank you. Our next question is, the school district's official motto is equity, growth, and excellence for all. How do you think ICS will help achieve this, and what needs to be done about tracking? Ellen, you can start.
Okay, so equity, growth, and excellence for all. It certainly gives a focus. The training program that my understanding is a number of the faculty and also some of the administration and school board have already been involved in it. And the newest group of training is coming through the community. And about 46 people participated in the first installment of 4. That course is being taught by 2 faculty, one from UWM, a retired, Elise Frattura, who has worked very hard on equity audits and will be teaching and talking about that. And Colleen Capper out of Madison. I've used Colleen Capper's materials and books for a long time. And I know where she's talking about, and she's not just talking about race and gender and religious issues. She's also looking at students with special needs. And she's very cognizant of the fact that we have to be looking at that topic too in terms of growth. So I think we're trying to build, I think the district is trying to build a collective capacity. So it's not just the school working on this issue, but it's also the community, and that these topics are brought up and that they're talked about and they're examined, and that we look at multiple ways to get at equity, to get at growth for every individual student, no matter which group they're coming from, that we don't group them. I shouldn't have used even the word group, no matter where they're coming from, and that we actually push towards excellence and providing opportunities for all.
Thank you. And Traci?
In an interview setting, you can forget the second part of the question, and which I did. So I'm just going to go back and I'm just going to say really quickly that in hiring more diverse faculty, what I'd like to see is what if, in some other districts, a pipeline that can be created for current students and through a grant program that are interested in teaching, and that there's like tuition reimbursement of 2 years of college for 3 years of service post-college. Things like that can really be used to help grow diverse faculty in the Shorewood community. As far as equity, growth, and excellence and the ICS tracking, diversity, equity, inclusion is not a side project. It is fully a part of who we are, and this needs to be reflected in the district's strategic plan, as well as in a student-centered decision-making process. We want to utilize data to be transparent so that we can see what's happening and to create measurable outcomes for improvement. I'd also, as I've said in earlier forums, like to see an equity audit so that we can hold ourselves accountable for implementation and for moving our intentions into actions. And I support the district's current ICS framework to start the process of dismantling systemic racism, but we know this can take time. So I'd like to see a diversity and inclusivity council that includes parents, community members, teachers, administrators, and students to concurrently create high impact initiatives for our students to experience these changes in the now. So that we are doing the work for the long run, but also for the immediate impact.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is, how do you envision Shorewood schools changing or maintaining the balance of academic rigor and mental health? And if you'd like to take a moment to breathe before you start, you can just start when you're ready.
I was just going to actually ask, can you repeat that question for me?
Yeah. How do you envision Shorewood schools changing or maintaining the balance of academic rigor and mental health for students?
Well, I love that question. Thank you for bringing that up and for making that connection, because I think, sometimes we forget the pressures as an adult that academics can create for students, especially in the high school environment. I think that we need to make sure that we are making sure that our academic standards are fair and that we're encouraging and creating an environment for all students to be successful, right? That we're not creating a different power dynamic where only certain students can get through, or that only certain learning styles are appreciated and valued, and an outcome is valued at all costs. And so having an increased mental health support system that acknowledges the importance of that being a very important component of life, and then also having structures in place within the district that are accessible, and making sure that those are not overloaded, right? That there is enough space and time for students to have meaningful relationships with adults and counselors and other folks within the district that can build those relationships with students, so that there is this accessibility and relationship that gets built. And that if that's not available currently, that we are creating that for each other and making sure that that mental health component is something that is not marginalized, but is freely talked about, the pressures, the stresses, and how we manage those. So that we can bring those out into the open, and that's something that we feel like we have to deal with alone or is isolating.
Okay, thank you. And Ellen?
I have a great deal of empathy for students as they go through the struggle between, it's not just academic, you use the word academic rigor, but so many of you are, as we know, you're on Ripples, and you might be in theater, and you might be in sports, and you may get home from all of those, and maybe the days before virtual, at 6 or 7 o'clock after rehearsals or sports, and have a quick bite to eat, and then you have to get to work because you have a goal, and the goal is to have high academic standards, have good grades, have great extracurriculars, because you may be, many of you, interested in going on to something after high school. And I think that this is an enormous pressure. It's like a pressure cooker. And we have to talk about that and have to see, how do we balance it? Sports and extracurriculars are a way to relax, except for the deadline for a newspaper may be the same time as the deadline for a big exam. So how do we balance it, and when do people get to sleep? I think we talk about them. I know your support staff and your guidance counselors are very strong. I've heard from one student that the guidance counselors have been very helpful in helping him deal with some of these issues as he's trying to balance the workload, and so he feels like he has someone to talk to. I noticed, and I don't know if this is still accurate, but it was on the support staff website, that there's some mental health clinic that is available through the school with the Children's Hospital. I think that's at least a statement that, hey, we do need to provide some services. I think talking about it, and I think perhaps teachers beginning to see when all of the work is due, so it's all not due on the same day. That would be kind of a nice way to balance something.
Thank you. And then our next question is, how should Shorewood balance the increase of authentic or experiential learning classes like visual journalism, watershed wisdom, etc., with more traditional courses? And then I guess like what are the strengths and weaknesses of each approach? Ellen, it will be your turn first.
I thought it was me first. Well, they're so appealing to take some of these other classes, right? That the traditional classes just seem very, okay, that's what we've always done. And here's some other wonderful things. I think I'm delighted that they're all being offered. And I think an individual student may have to decide herself or himself, how do I open myself up to all kinds of possibilities and not cut some things off? I think that the universities, and I don't want to give you bad advice and you run off and say, oh, Ellen Eckman said that, you know, universities are looking at more things and I can get into college if I go into these experiential things. I can't tell you that, but they are looking at a bigger portfolio of who you are as a person and what you bring to the university beside taking 4 years of this and 4 years of that and 4 years of that. Not that you shouldn't be sure you take them. I would also like to challenge some of the traditional courses to look at ways to include experiential activities. And I think that or authentic learning activities. So if you're studying, I'm going back to my field, American government, are you going to, what kinds of things are you doing? I mean, it's not the 5th grade trip to Madison I'm talking about, but are you participating, as some of you are, on the school board? Are you participating or attending a local meeting? Are you bringing a petition to the local government or to the school board and using that as a way? And that can be still part of an American government course. It can still be part of an assignment that's traditional, but it allows you to be authentic and to get out into the field. So I guess a balance is what I'm saying.
Thank you. And then Traci.
Yes, I think essentially what we're talking about is the balance between the breadth of learning and the depth of learning. And I think both are equally important, that you want to be able to dive deep into your areas of interest and to fully explore those subjects. And to also have it not be too much, though, that you're tired and worn out and not as engaged in the subject because it went on for too long, right? So that you want to make sure that it has a nice structure around it so that that is an engaging approach with the experiential learning. And then also too, that making sure that you do have a wide enough breadth, right, of knowledge in the curriculum and the instruction, and that you are getting the exposure to fully explore. That's what this time is all about, is to see what interests you, what piques your interest, and to be able to have a full understanding of that. You need to have that breadth as well as the ability to have that depth. So finding that balance can be challenging because it's something that is individual for each student, and it needs a real deep collaboration amongst your teachers, but also there needs to be that support there for that. And so to accomplish that learning environment is what we're striving to achieve. And having that ability to be able to take your area of interest and try it on for a while and know that you don't have to make that choice right now where you're at, and that you have the ability to explore other areas, but that you have that balance of the exposure. And then also too, so that the standards that are met for the opportunity that comes next for you is there and provided for you as well.
Thank you. So our next question is, once the district stops offering a virtual learning option, to what extent do you support the usage of technology? And should this vary among grade levels or ages? We have Traci first for this question.
First, I do want to just clarify that I think that the virtual option should be available for the remainder of the pandemic for any family or students who choose that option for either themselves or for their families. And then I think what we're seeing right now is a possible learning adaptation, especially at the younger ages, but also potentially too for older kids, to a deep adaptation to the technological exposure that kids have faced. So my youngest is in 4K, and up until recently, a couple of weeks ago, all of her schooling has been through the use of a technology. So her learning style is different than what I witnessed with my son, who did not have that experience. So when we're talking about technology for different age levels, absolutely yes. We need to be aware of a healthy use of technology, that it is something that is part of the student experience. It's something that can enhance the student experience, and that it needs to be scaffolded out appropriate to age level. And that we're going to have to make sure that what has happened this year with that technological exposure is taken advantage of and used as a positive. And then also that we are using that deep technological exposure to help students create their own path in their areas of interest on the older levels as well. So it opens up opportunity and does not take opportunity away.
Okay, so the question is virtual learning and the use of technology as we move forward. I would absolutely agree, and I believe the school board has also made it very clear at this point that there will be a virtual option available for a continuing virtual option available for those families that will need it as we come out of the pandemic, and that kind of decision will be forthcoming because some families will need to continue to be in that kind of a setting. I have a short intermediate school student told me that he's absolutely exhausted by being on Zoom and on the computer all day long, and that he has become a great fan of mathematics because he gets to use a pencil and a paper. And so we need a balance. I mean, he liked math anyway, but he didn't like doing it on a computer. He didn't like doing it in a virtual environment. He likes doing it on paper and pencil and manipulating the numbers like that. We need a balance. We need to have, we've certainly seen some of the power into the good of Zooms and virtual learning, and we've also seen some of the negatives. We're going to have to, it seems to me, have a real focus on media literacy so that students know how to use technology appropriately, how to use the media appropriately, so that it's not just I can use the digital, but what is strong places to be and what is not, what are not. And so I think what I'm saying, as I said before, is we need a balance. Yes, of course, there's going to be a continuation of the use of technology, and there has to be a balance, and there may be less technology in some courses and more technology in others, and we have to be open to that.
Thank you. The Department of Justice has said that the Shorewood School District has been over-identifying students for special education. There are calls in the community to move students that are on the cusp into general education. Do you support this effort? Why or why not? Ellen can answer first.
Okay, I am aware of the fact that from several meetings about the special ed designation. It's very, unfortunately, it is more common than one would like that people with different learning styles or different language styles or different looks get labeled. And we have to be very cognizant of that. And it may just be a vocabulary problem. It may just be some other issues that aren't necessarily special needs. So what do you do to provide opportunities? What do you do so that students aren't labeled very quickly on the basis of race or language skills or religious indication? So this is quite problematic. So, and it is an important step that the school district has to do to make sure it is not over labeling students. So there's quite a lot of discussion in the field right now about the benefit of pulling people out and or keeping them in classes for special, let's say speech and language or special work. There's a lot of emphasis in other school districts, and I think the ICS is bringing that up again too, and that's on using RTI, where but it's again a pullout. And so every time you pull students out of a class, you create some other issues. And some of the research is showing that student, every time that student's pulled out, it doesn't mean when they go back in that they're able to catch up or be on task with everybody else. So it's not a simple answer, and I'm sorry I wasn't able to give you a simple answer because it's a complex topic that must be addressed.
Thank you. Traci?
The issue that we have right now in the district of the over-identification of students into special education is something that we need to take a deep look at. It is evident that this is being done to students of color, and that we need to make sure that we are writing the systems of systemic racism that create that environment. And so as we are having open and honest conversations about that in our ICS work, to make sure that that screening process is fair and equitable, and that we're looking at issues of linguistic justice and making sure that we are not stereotyping kids and wrongly assessing their abilities based on race or background or whether or not their family's first language is English. And so that's, I think, the first step that we need to take. And then we need to make sure that we are taking an approach that is best for the individual students who are need the special education services, and that they are met outside the classroom as well as inside the classroom, so that they have that, again, that balance of getting the support that they need, plus the full opportunity of being in general education whenever possible, but so that they're not falling behind and that they are able to have their own educational approach.
Thank you. The next question is a little long, so I'll read it twice. During the most recent school board meeting, the interim director of business services made a recommendation that the district eliminate multiple special education teacher and aide positions through attrition, and in turn increase special education support within gen ed instruction. By eliminating these positions, it is projected that the district would save $280,000. Do you support this recommendation? Why or why not? I'll read it again. During the most recent school board meeting, the interim director of business services made a recommendation that the district eliminate multiple special education teacher and aide positions through attrition, and in turn increase special education support within gen ed instruction. By eliminating these positions, it is projected that the district would save $280,000. Do you support this recommendation? Why or why not? Traci can go first.
Yes, I think what's important in this conversation is that there is a looming budget deficit that is on the horizon due to students and families who have chosen to leave the district. And I think that it is not appropriate to have a conversation about special ed reductions in terms of as a fix to a different problem, so to speak. So I think we need to address the budget crisis that we're in by owning our decision-making process that was involved in that, and by looking for multiple opportunities to overcome that financial deficit, which we need to take actions to correct. Now, having said that, what the district did is they put into the same presentation this opportunity, or as you said, recommendation to decrease special education through attrition teachers and not replace them. And that putting those two dots together is not right. And if there is if that is the correct route for the district to do as far as special education, that has to be completely outside of the conversation of making up for a deficit of financing that had nothing to do with that. So if we're not seeing a corresponding cut in the amount of special education students, then we need to make sure that we're looking across the district to help solve this problem and not just at one isolated group to address a budget issue that needs to be addressed across the board.
Thank you. Ellen?
Okay. There were two, I actually have here with me the budget workshop from March 16th and the slides that are actually don't reflect quite as strong a recommendation as your question implies. Mr. Dixon, Roger Dixon, was presenting assumptions, and he was basing his budget presentation on a set of assumptions on where we will be. And some of those assumptions have left out because we cannot do it yet, how much money will be coming from the state and how much general funds and how many other funds, what the percentage the state will be bringing back into the special ed, that's a specific line. So there are quite a lot of details that are still out there. And he was showing deficits at different levels that may or may not happen. But I think he's alerting everybody to the fact that there are multiple ways of addressing deficits. And so he's sort of pushing people to think about them. He also reiterated several times that he is going to work very closely, and everybody is, with the Director of Special Education and Pupil Services, with faculty. He's looking at and presented data on comparable schools in our North Shore area and what staffing levels there are in gen ed, and special ed. And these are all parts of what has to go in. So it wasn't the term recommendation makes it sound like it's going to roll into a vote pretty certain. And I don't think that's what you're going to see. You're going to see a much more nuanced response, but we have to be aware of the fact that we may be moving into a deficit model. And I know my time's up, but I just want to add that another time when we had declining enrollment, the village board and the school board worked very closely together to find ways to increase the village population that could therefore help the school district.
Thank you. Our next question is, do you have concerns about students falling behind after a year of online instruction? And if so, how should the district mitigate the impact? Ellen, you can start us off.
That's a nice, if the other questions weren't hard, this one's even harder. So the term that I see being used is academic loss. We're assuming that there is going to be academic loss, but we don't know yet how much and who is experiencing it. So for some students, virtual learning has provided some solitude and some opportunity to grow in ways that they never experienced before. So those students might have found this an incredibly enriching opportunity. They could progress on their own. They weren't bothered by the interruptions of other people. They weren't being talked down to or laughed at or whatever else makes students feel uncomfortable and keeps them from performing well. For other students, there couldn't be anything worse than being by themselves in front of a computer. And so did they do their work? There are school districts reporting, if we look at the research, and I haven't seen it for ours, an increase in the number of students with failing grades. So we're waiting for some of the data. The Wisconsin out of Madison, they're doing a very, very detailed study of it. For us, we're going to have to find individual students and see what they need. Are there going to be extra programs? Questions have been raised about enrichment through summer school, enrichment through other opportunities. So I think some students will be just fine, others will not be, and we will need to identify and help those students who need help in mathematics, in English writing, in foreign and world languages, and all kinds of areas. But I think it might be more individualized than we thought, and it might mean that the first few weeks of school start in a different way than they have in other years.
Thank you. And Traci?
I'm an online teacher. I've been an online teacher for the past 15 years, as well as teaching face-to-face at MATC. So I know that quality education can occur in an online environment. I also know that this was an incredibly unusual year. I know the amount of training and support that I had and time that I had to effectively deliver online classes, and teachers were put in an impossible situation in the pandemic and did the best that they could to provide a learning environment that allowed growth. But as Ellen said, it is really about individual students, and some students we know thrived in that environment and adapted well, and some students it didn't meet at all their learning styles, and that's okay. And so I think the first thing that we need to do is, remove any type of stigma about being behind or missing out or not catching up, and knowing that that's something that can be overcome, and even if you are at the end of your career here in Shorewood, you have so much time that you'll be able to, make up whatever academic loss occurred. But we do need to help with that. And I think that, and also kind of the unknown, right? Of like, what are the college expectations? What have you missed out on? What haven't you missed out on? And that whole conversation can be mitigated by structures of support that we can start to look at with additional, not just for next year, starting of the school year, but perhaps looking at things like a summer academy that would be optional and not required for students, removing a stigma away from that to reduce pressures on overloading schedule, and having an opportunity not just for right now, but something that could be built into something positive for students in the future.
Thank you. Next, we're going to ask, with the proposed addition of low-income housing in Shorewood, how can you ensure that all students feel welcome in the Shorewood School District? And we'll have Traci start on this one.
We also ask really quickly that you try your hardest to actually stick to the 90 seconds. Thank you.
So one of the things that I think is really important with this question is the idea of socioeconomic diversity and the value that that brings to the Shorewood community. I'm a first-generation college student graduate myself, so that I wasn't the first one in my family to go to college. My brothers and sisters were, but I was able to actually have my college opportunity because of scholarship. So I'm very deeply aware of the educational opportunity that we have in Shorewood and how we want to foster that, that socioeconomic diversity. And in doing so, we want to make sure that we're creating an environment that does not stigmatize people from different socioeconomic backgrounds, and instead celebrating that different socioeconomic diversity, because it is something that we need to be welcoming of, and that we want to create more opportunities for, because we have an opportunity in our position here in Shorewood to provide an excellence in education. I know the difference of educational environments that my kids have. It's very different than what was available to me, and without, by virtue of living here. We get to live in this beautiful, wonderful community and have this wonderful opportunity of schools and the opportunity that education provides moving forward. So socioeconomic diversity is really important and something that we need to foster.
Thank you. And now for Ellen.
Sure. I'm gonna use my sort of experience from my village board to begin answering it, because you use the action that has just been proposed by the village board in terms of its rolling over for 1 year some money for a model. They're talking about affordable housing. Okay, affordable housing does not mean necessarily low income. It means that the housing that's available is more affordable. Some buildings are built right now. The Light Horse was built with money from the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, and a certain number of the apartments had to be maintained at a certain level of income. And I don't quote me on the percentages because I don't know them. But for some of those percentages, it would be the starting salary for a single parent with children who was teaching school. So very low, these are the kind of affordable housing options that we're talking about. Now, that doesn't mean, the second part of the question deals with the question of how do we create a welcoming community? And welcoming community on the basis of socioeconomic status, as well as all the other areas. We already have in our community 450 units right now in the River Park high-rise towers that are, I don't know if it's Title 8, but those are clearly low-income housing. And we welcome those citizens. They are our citizens of all different, and certainly in a low economic status. So we have some experience, and we need to use that to continue to welcome everybody. And I think that's very much what we're seeing in the work. Yep.
Thank you. How should school board members gauge student opinions and communicate best with students? We'll go first to Ellen.
Could you just repeat it, because I was just thinking about half of it and didn't hear the second half.
Yeah, of course. How should school board members best gauge student opinions and communicate with students?
Okay, great. Gauge student opinions. Well, one of the most obvious ways to get student opinions is to ask them, and not just ask them on surveys, but to create focus groups, to create opportunities. One of the things I always like to see is when you see a group of students talking informally with, whether it's the principal or the school board members, or and not in a, you know, baiting each other, and but just a quiet conversation. The nicest ones occur over lunch. when you offer food to students and you have them come talk to you. So that's one way to get opinion, and to have some real serious questions. Having school board representatives, student school board members is really crucial for getting direct access to the school board of students' opinions. So I think that that's the most clear one. We can always do surveys. Surveys can be tricky, and they have to be written extremely well, and they have to be accessed by a large enough percentage of people to really get the student opinion. So sometimes SurveyMonkey questions look like they would be really good, but if they're not written well and they don't get the answer that you really are looking for, there's an art to writing the question. So I think there's ways to get student opinions, and I think they're very, very important and very necessary.
Thank you. And then Traci.
Yes, I think that, there is, again, when we're talking about gauging student opinions and then communicating with students, I think those are two important elements of the question. So, the first thing I think is, representative approach, and having the student school board members are really valuable. I don't know, I know that they run, they can be pretty intense and pretty long, but your student representatives have been really great at bringing the student voice directly to the board and to the community that is watching. And so I think it's really important to have that student voice on the board. And that is something that I think that we need to ensure is continued in the future. The other thing is too, I'd like to see, opportunity for input, and that opportunity can't be, the route to that opportunity has to be fair and available. It can't just be through who you know, or who knows another person who could talk to another person who gets the information through. So having set forums with direct contact and open conversation, and also making that be a comfortable conversation. Not that you have to go and talk to the board about something, but that the board comes to you, and that is having that direct communication route. And then also too, making sure that all modes of communication are available, so that people who are comfortable having face-to-face conversations can have that. People who are comfortable writing or texting, or having a different type of communication, all of that is valued, and the input is received.
Thank you. We are now reaching the conclusion of the Ripples portion of this forum, and it is time for both candidates to give their closing statements. Just as a reminder, you will have the same amount of time as all the other questions, so 90 seconds. And since Traci went first for the opening, Ellen, you may go first for the closing.
Well, first, I thank you all very, very much for this opportunity. Yeah, your questions have been really challenging, and that's always good, and thoughtful, and well put together. So I've enjoyed the challenge. I hope I was successful in answering it. I really wish, I'm delighted that I can see your faces. Your questions on technology get at the heart of it, because I also teach online. I really wish that I could be with people. I miss that. That's my biggest loss, is being with people. So just to reiterate a few of my thoughts, I sense myself as being uniquely qualified. It isn't for this school board position. It isn't often that a person in my position and my time steps up. And I stepped up for some very, very unselfish reasons. I felt that I had something to offer to the school board and to the community of students and parents and teachers, and that it would be difficult, a shame if I didn't do it. I have my teaching experience, my village experience. I'm a community advocate, and I am a university professor. And as I told you, I'm proud of the fact that my teachers and my administrators are present in your school. I don't know if you know Mr. Noldowski. I don't know if you know the new math teacher, Rebecca Vandersoos. She was in a very important program. So I think that I am the right person at this time, because I bring some very unique qualifications. And I thank you again.
Thank you. And Traci?
Thank you so much for inviting me here to participate. The final thoughts that I'd like to leave you with is that I hope you'll consider being an advocate for change with me. Our current moment, which is the reason why I stepped up to run, has created an opportunity to embrace change and growth. And the moment that we're in can propel us forward, and it can help us bridge the gap between where we are and where we need to be. And we can use this moment to come together. I've run the timeline. I saw what happened in your freshman year. I've seen what happened in your sophomore year, your junior year, and your senior year. And you can let this moment define you, or you can define this moment, or more accurately, you can do both. We all can. Collectively, I've heard the students of Shorewood stand up and ask questions that no one else was brave enough to say in these moments. I've heard you talk about how you wanted to provide a better experience, not just for each other, but for those who come after you. Your sense of resilience and stewardship and love and care for your community is inspiring. So please know you are not the leaders of tomorrow, but you are the leaders of right now. And together we can step into this change that is occurring around us and let us propel us forward. If elected to serve, I'll foster an environment that brings students, teachers, parents, administrators, the community, and the board together to put students first always. My background at MATC has a lot of detailed work with this occurring. And so if you want more information, please go to my website, Traci for shorewoodschools.com, and feel free to reach out. I'd love to connect more and hear about your perspective.
Thank you. And thank you both for answering our questions. We'll take about a 2-minute break, giving the candidates a chance to catch their breath. And then Student Representative Alexis will pick it back up for the student question part of the forum. So don't leave, it's not over.
All right, so right now we're going to move on to the open question part of the forum. So thank you to the editorial staff for all of your wonderful questions. And thank you to the candidates for answering them. I know we asked some pretty tough ones. So to reintroduce myself, my name's Alexis, and I am another student representative on the school board. I will be moderating the forum from here. Seeing as adults have had a lot of opportunities to communicate with the candidates, we're going to be restricting the participation of this section to students. Before we get started, just a quick disclaimer, we reserve the right to shut down questions that are duplicates, include any personal attacks, are not relevant to the specific elected office, or deal with personnel issues. So for students who would like to ask questions, we ask that you use the raise hand function and wait to be called on. Please state your name and grade and any clubs that you may represent. It would be nice if you could unmute and turn your camera on when asking your question, but we also have enabled the host only chat feature. So if you would like, you can send your question to me via chat. Although we can't guarantee that we'll get to those. Once again, each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer the question, and the order of first responses will alternate. All right, so if you have any questions, please raise your hand. All right, I'm just gonna go down the list. Mira?
Hello, I'm very sorry. I'm not able to turn my camera on at this time, but my name is Mira. I'm a junior at Shorewood. I do not represent any particular club in asking this question, so there's that. Do you have a plan to try and bring more AP classes to Shorewood, particularly in the area of social studies where there are none?
So for this question, I think Traci can start first.
Thank you, Mira, for bringing that question to the table. I think when we're talking about AP classes, we need to be aware of, again, providing the opportunity so that students in Shorewood can go to the next step in their educational career. Without a robust AP offering, students are losing opportunities for entrances to colleges that want to see that or want to see that rigor. And even though we have partnerships with UWM, the offerings can be tapped out, especially when we're talking about something like history. And as an English teacher, I'm a big proponent of liberal arts. And so we do have to balance that with the district's availability and need and finances. But right now we do have the ability to increase our partnerships. It's my understanding that most colleges will view the rigor of a dual enrollment. So when high school students are taking college classes at the same time in the same light as they would AP courses. But I think that is something that we need to make sure that we look at as an opportunity that we're providing for students who might not might have opportunities taken away because not through something of their own choosing, but because the district didn't provide that for them to be able to take advantage of that opportunity.
All right, Ellen, you can go next.
Yeah, thank you. A very interesting question that has a lot of pieces that we can discuss, but let me address I think a move for AP classes would need to come not specifically from the school board, from the top down, but it should be coming from the students and the faculty. And so you mentioned the social studies is an area that has probably weighted courses, but not necessarily AP courses. If the faculty and feels that that's a way to go, and working with the director of curriculum and instruction and working with the principal has a proposal to develop more AP classes, that would be a place where that kind of movement would begin. And then it would come to the school board in terms of a policy, but the school board sets the policy. I also want to, because earlier in the discussion tonight, we talked a lot about the pressure that's on a lot of students. You examine closely the universities that you're interested in. Many of them are changing their criteria for acceptance of AP courses. They are becoming more selective, or let somebody say less inclined, that's the way I should put it, to accept AP classes. And so different things are happening at the university level that may allow you to take some other kinds of courses that would provide you with a broader perspective and a broader spectrum. So instead of worried about social studies AP classes, maybe get into some of the other things that are already offered. So check out the university that you're interested in and then develop a proposal.
Thank you. Our next question will be from Emma.
Hi, my name is Emma Stenzel. I am a senior at Shorewood High School, obviously. So what would be your approach to work through differing opinions among school board members so that you could all come to an agreement?
For this question, Ellen, you will be going first.
Right. Okay, so the question is, how would I help school board members come to agreement when they have so many different opinions? One of the things, as a leader, I pride myself on being a collaborative leader. I like to build consensus. I like to be in settings, in working settings where the discourse and the discussion, we may agree to disagree, but we listen to each other and we're respectful as we listen to each other. That's very much a style that I like to lead in and that I like to demonstrate. So how do we do that? Sometimes I suppose you see it yourselves in your own courses, in your own classes. How do you make sure that discussions are well handled? I think just for this forum, you set some procedures that you were not allowing this and not allowing that, and people should be respectful. I think that sometimes that has to happen. I haven't seen it in the school board meetings that I've been at. I've seen the school board members be attentive and thoughtful and respectful. I have seen some disagreements, but nothing as I've seen in some other kinds of meetings. So I think a discussion among the school board members of how do we have healthy discourse, civic discourse, and that we can agree to disagree. And that would be my approach.
Traci?
At MATC, I come from a shared governance model background where different elements of the college come together in different employee groups to collaborate and work together to put students in first in our decision-making process. So with that being a practical approach, we have training in something called collaborative decision-making so that an environment is fostered where actually the differing opinions are encouraged and brought to the forefront so that there isn't a reticence to ask the tough questions that I talked about earlier. I've seen some of your student reps actually make some really great comments in the board meetings that weren't being discussed. And so that environment of creating a safe environment where those type of questions are brought up, deeply discussed, and that there isn't a reticence to not get along when you have that respectful discourse embedded into the process of the approach that's taken and that agreement previous to the conversation. So it's about being able to bring up differing viewpoints as well as managing it when they come up and making sure that it's civil. As a school board member, I think we should have meetings that are appropriate for all members of our district to attend, from our youngest students to our high school age students to members of the community. I think the board has a really respectful approach with one another, but I also think that asking tougher questions would be okay as well, and that can be managed and fostered for a healthy conversation.
All right, thank you, Emma, for your question. Molly?
Hi, I'm Molly. I'm a senior. My question's about the talks to potentially change to block scheduling at the high school next year. So do you support this idea, and what do you think the disadvantages or advantages are from both an academic and an emotional health standpoint?
Traci will be going first for this question.
Sorry, I just wanted to make sure I got Molly's question. So with the potential changing to block scheduling, the first thing to remember is that with the board, that the board doesn't weigh in on every decision that is made. So this would be something that is really important for the administration and the teachers and the students to collaborate on and to have a recommendation that is suitable for the delivery of the curriculum, but also, like you said, that it doesn't cause, with block scheduling, it can cause an opportunity to be able to modify the schedule so that more things can fit in, but then also that can create an overload and a pressure on students to take everything that's available. So when those challenges come up, there has to be more advising to help students and parents navigate not just the right now, but the long-term plan for what your own personal next educational goals are, and making sure that there's room to breathe too, and having that healthy balance, and the emotional support health that Molly was discussing is really important with that decision-making process. So the board has the opportunity to weigh in on certain decisions, but also other decisions are about, making sure that approach, so that all parties are brought to the table in all decision-making process, is embedded in the culture of the district. And hopefully that results in something that is beneficial.
Thank you. Our next question will be from Alamitu.
Okay, so question on block scheduling. Block scheduling has advantages. It allows some flexibility. When you think about it, when you go to the university, you are usually on a block schedule. You don't have all your classes every day. You don't have them in the same order. Some of them are 2.5 hours long. Some of them are an hour and a half twice a week. Some of them, they're all over the place. And so there must be some advantages to doing that in terms of how universities operate and organize themselves. There are many schools looking at using block scheduling right now in our state, in our area. I would say that the group in the high school considering block scheduling would study how it's implemented, the effect it's had, do a thorough evaluation of the pluses, the opportunities, and the problems from a block scheduling. It can allow more class time, it can allow more group work, and it can possibly allow, some classes can be on a block schedule, some classes may not be. So there's a lot of variations, and it would come, it would change people's schedules, which can be problematic, because then you have to remember which day you're on, day 1, day 2 to 3. Et cetera. And I think it would have to be really thought out very, very thoroughly at the high school level, dealing with parents and students and faculty, and then come to the school board as a decision is being made. I think the school board, though it is not setting the policy, because this would be such a change, would want to be certainly up to date and part of the consideration.
All right, thank you, Ellen. I skipped over you that one time. I'm sorry. Now, Alamiji, you can ask your question.
Hi, I'm Melanie too. I'm the president of Youth Rising Up at Shorewood High School, and I'm a senior. I've been going to school since K4, and through my own experiences, as well as working and talking with other students of color, we've shared that there is a separate and unequal approach to disciplining students at Shorewood. And I was just curious to know, how would you address the unequal treatment of disciplinary actions that disproportionately affect students of color?
That's $1 million question, right? That is a huge question, and one that I'm very glad that you asked. I wish I had a very simple answer for it, but I don't think there is a simple answer. We need to retrain a lot of people. We certainly try and do it as we're preparing administrators in our programs and teachers in our teacher ed program, but we have unequal approach to discipline. And it's beyond just in the school. We have an unequal approach to discipline in our policing. We have an unequal approach to discipline in our court system. And it's part of the systemic racism that unfortunately students like you are facing. So I think we need some serious work on it. I think that the things that Mr. Coleman and the new Director of Equity, Ms. Tucker, are working on in terms of an equity audit, that's exactly what it will point out. that though many people know that it's there, let's look at the numbers and let's look at the impact of those numbers. What has happened to that individual student? I was thinking today of one of the saddest things that I ever, there are a number of things I did as an assistant principal that were very, very hard. And one of them, and this wasn't on a racial issue, but I do think it may have been a social economic issue. I was part of an expulsion of a student. I have never forgotten that I was part of that. And I've never not been sorry. I mean, I've always been sorry because I don't think we looked hard enough at what we were doing. There had to be some other solution for that student. He had no resources and it was up to us. And so that has always lingered with me. So this is one student. What is happening and what are we doing with so many other students that got lost? He got lost and I am always sorry for it. So we have to do something. And I thank you for your question. Very thoughtful.
Thank you. Traci?
Me too. Thank you for that question as well. When we look at the disparities in discipline according to race, you know, the first thing that we need to do is name it and claim it and say that this is something that we have an issue with and something that we need to actively work to change. And we need to make sure that we are looking at the wider cultural representation of Shorewood in freedom of expression for students and how that expression is interpreted, how that expression is then reacted against, and then how that can translate to misinterpretations that just didn't need to go down the disciplinary route to begin with. And so I think if we look at this from what the board can do is to make sure that we are supporting that broader equity, you know, dismantling of systemic racism. This is another prime example of it, like we talked about with the disparity of students of color being disproportionately referred to special education. This is another prime example of that unfair treatment. And so when we're looking at dismantling that, we need to make sure that the structures are in place to provide additional training of cultural relevance and cultural acceptance of how are we going to look at and define and not make it subjective anymore. I mean, there are measurements, rubrics that can be put in place to help define what constitutes disciplinary and appropriate disciplinary action and not appropriate disciplinary action. And then you can take a look at those measurements and make sure that they are the foundation for a more equitable treatment of students.
Thank you. So I have a question in the chat from the GSA. If on the school board, how would you use your role to support efforts to make Shorewood's health and HGD curriculum more inclusive of LGBTQ+ students? And for this question, I believe it is Traci's turn to go first.
I'm sorry, there was a lot of acronyms in there. Can you please, I heard the questions from the Gay Straight Alliance, correct? And then can you repeat the question for me?
Yes, of course. If on the school board, how would you make sure you use your role to support efforts to make Shorewood's health and HGD curriculum more inclusive of LGBTQ+ students?
Okay. And then I actually have something to add from that question. So if you aren't familiar with the topic, what would you do to educate yourself about it? That part of the question also does come from GSA, just to clarify.
Sure. Okay. Okay. With the LGBTC reflective and the concerns to be reflective in the curriculum, I think what we need to do to educate, yes, we do need to educate ourselves on to what that means and what our own personal relationships are with the community to make sure that it's reflective. And that when we're having the conversations about the curriculum, that we're not like limiting our focus to ethnicity or socioeconomic class, but that we are also looking at representations of the LGBTC community as well. to educate myself in this, like I said, because my kids are younger and I don't have the current exposure to what is happening right now in the school. I can only talk from my personal experience with the LGBTC and say that it's important to be an ally. It's not something that I identify with myself. I can tell you that I have members of my family that I absolutely support and have gone, through that the stigma that can be surrounded by that, and creating an inclusive environment on the high school level is really important for the LGBTC community. And so I, as an advocate, as someone who has people that I love dearly and want to make sure that their experiences is not anything that is ever repeated, and something that can be a part of our past, and to have an inclusive environment is something that I know that I need to be more aware of the practical approaches that could occur. And so I just know that it involves a willingness to not look at it from the lens that you grew up in, but to be really aware of the otherization that can occur in a power-based structure. And I'm sorry, my time is up with that approach, but in my heart, I am an advocate for LGBTC, and I did not do well with that question, and I will absolutely educate myself to do better in the future. My apologies.
Thank you. We really appreciate the responses to the student questions, but we do want to remind the candidates to stay within the 90-second time frame, just so that we can get to more questions and to keep the speaking time equitable. All right, Ellen, your turn.
I heard there was one phrase I didn't understand in the question, HED, inclusive. I'll just take it from what I understood.
I can say quick, it's like the health and then the human growth and development. That's what the HGD is. We should have clarified that.
Thanks, I got it. All right, I was thinking that's what it was. All right, so first, let's start with making sure that everybody knows, and I'm sure the school administration does, and teachers need to know too, that LGBTQ students have legal rights. They absolutely have legal rights. With the new administration in Washington, and despite efforts in our own state legislature to change things, these rights are part and parcel of what they are entitled to and how students should be treated. And I think we have to keep reminding, I know it's a shame we have to keep reminding people of that. Transgender students have rights, they have athletic rights. There's one legislature in the state that's trying to take them away, but his chances are minimal, and we need to make sure that doesn't happen. In health classes, then, what is in the curriculum? That is the question you're really asking. And how do we go about making sure that that curriculum does not discriminate against LGBTQ or not teach what it should be teaching in terms of what the legal positions are? And so I think that's a question for the department chairs to look at, the faculty to look at. And if that's not happening, then the next step for all students, I don't think it should just fall on LGBTQ students to do, but to take that to the principal, or first maybe to the director of curriculum instruction. We have to follow the steps. Because what you're saying is that there is a piece of this curriculum that is missing, and it's not right, and it needs to be changed. And you have to speak up and be an ally to the LGBTQ students. Health courses have always been an area of contention because parents don't like what's being taught in health, and so they sometimes get a little bit involved. So let's take this as action.
All right, thank you. Our next question will be from Micaiah.
Hi,
Micaiah, we can't really hear you right now. All right, thank you. He sent it to me through the chat. So the question is, how will the school board members push with the agenda of an inclusionary curriculum? And for this question, I believe Ellen will be going first.
If I understand the question, is how will school board members push for a more inclusive agenda? Okay, so a more inclusive curriculum or a more inclusive agenda? I wasn't, all right.
Would you like for me to repeat the question?
Yeah, please do.
The question is, how will the school board members push with the agenda of an inclusionary curriculum?
Inclusionary curriculum. Thank you. I'm sorry. I missed part of it. Okay. I think they have to ask a lot of questions. and remembering also that the school board sets policy. And so the school board sets policy in terms of what the overlapping policy and the specific items get taken care of at the lower level, for instance, in the schools, in each of the schools. But the broader question is, how do we have a more inclusive curriculum? And that gets at a lot of what we've been talking about this tonight. I don't think we can expect everything to instantaneously change because we're going to be using the ICS model and we're going to be looking at equity issues, but that is a place to get started. The curriculum gets set in many, many ways, as I alluded to earlier. That curriculum and what have to be taught in the schools sometimes gets set by the state legislature. So the state determines that we're going to teach blah, blah, blah. All right. And sometimes, so health has to be taught in schools. We used to have to teach driver's ed. We are going to have to, you have to have a certain courses and certain information when you teach American history, when you teach Wisconsin history. And how do you make sure the components of those are inclusionary? Has to be up to the faculty, the director of curriculum and instruction, and the school board wants to make sure that that's happening. And so that they can see that in terms of how students are performing. And I like to see an inclusion curriculum. We're going to have to get at all of the issues that we've been mentioning tonight. We're going to have to get at racial issues, gender, LGBTQ, socioeconomic status, Muslim, Jewish, Asian Americans. I mean, we're going to have to include all the groups, and we're going to have curriculum that welcomes everybody into that discussion.
And Traci?
Yes, I agree with Ellen in that the inclusionary curriculum is, there is no discipline that is exempt from that. So there are some that are, you can imagine that would be more, it might be an easy, quote unquote, easier time to incorporate inclusionary curriculum. But the fact is that there is no discipline that is excluded from that approach. And the other thing is too, that I think that, we want to take a wider range and not just focus it on, high school, is that we want to see this inclusionary curriculum start from K4 through 12. And to do that, I agree that it starts with the faculty working with that longer approach. And so that you need that coordination from the director of curriculum to ensure that that is representative on not just across the disciplines, but across the grade levels. And then also too, that it's appropriately introduced to students for their grade level, so that we are creating a sense of empathy and approach as students learn and grow. And that when we are creating that overlap and that latter approach for students, that in the high school level, when that inclusionary curriculum is present, it's seamless. It's just a part of who we are. And so then we just need to make sure that we build in double checks for that to occur.
Thank you. And it looks like we have one last question from Mira.
Yes, hello again. My next question is a little probably less broad, and I think, I don't speak for any club here, but I think it's a reality of virtual school that there is reduced student participation in classes. Oftentimes, I would say it can feel like you are the only one in the class with the teacher. because of reduced classmate participation. Do you have any thoughts or ideas for policies about increasing student participation in class to maybe not the same level that it would have been before the pandemic, but a similar one?
Now I think it is Traci's turn to go first.
Yes, I am currently teaching virtually as well. And so I know the challenges that is created in having that participatory approach and that engagement. In my own classroom, I am a strong believer in collaborative learning and breakout groups, and it's difficult to achieve that in the virtual environment. But if we had an investment in a learning management system, such as Canvas, that aligns with the learning management systems of many universities, such as UWM, those type of environments are much easier to be fostered so that the breakout rooms and the engagement can be built in to the virtual classroom. And then also too, that would help prepare us for beyond right now, because having that kind of exposure to a more robust learning management system such as Canvas will help with the transition immensely for high school students that are going to the college level, because having that experience and exposure to that type of learning management system will help that transition from high school level to college level, and that sense of confidence that's already, like, you already know it, you have that sense of a more robust learning management system. So that is something that would be wonderful to encourage. And in the meantime, sorry, I'm out of time, but that collaborative environment can be replicated with increased instructional design supports.
Thank you. Ellen?
Well, I think the first thing to talk about is that, from my understanding and from what I just read from the superintendent today, is that the school board intends and the schools intend to come back face-to-face next year, 5 times a week in the fall. And that what we're doing in April is coming back in a modified, in both the rest of the spring and next year, there will be a virtual option. So the question becomes, how do we help the virtual students who are coming in and maintaining virtual have a quality experience, and also be able to continue to enhance the participation? Because I think the participation in classes is very, very important. And despite all my efforts in the online classes, and I'm teaching graduate students, so it's a little bit different. So when my graduate students, they do all show their video, and they do talk a lot. Not all of them, I shouldn't say that. Not everybody is inclined to talk. So we have to do different things. I think projects, project-based learning is very, very important. I think that there are a number of techniques for breakout rooms, whether you're using breakout rooms in the Zoom setting, breakout rooms on Microsoft Teams, there are ways to do it. And I think the teacher has to do something to encourage, require, nurture more participation. And that is something that's true even when everybody's in the classroom. Even when I have all my students, there's always a few that are always or could be dominating, and I have to find ways to encourage the others. And it just becomes more difficult in the virtual format, but not impossible.
All right, thank you. It looks like actually we have one more question. This will be our last question, and it's from Micaiah.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. I'll reintroduce myself. I'm Micaiah. I'm a senior at Shorewood, and I serve as Vice President of Youth Rising Up. My question is just, I think it's also kind of a good question as we're ending. What kind of makes you both stand out, and how will you continue to keep the student involvement, since we're the main people that are being affected? How will you continue to do that?
All right, it is Ellen's turn to go first for this question.
Okay, so what makes me stand out? Probably not my height, because I'm not very tall, so I'm not going to stand out in a group of students. What makes me stand out, I think, is my teaching experience. The fact that I have taught at high school and I actually started off teaching in a middle school. So I understand the importance of really interacting with this age group. And I say that in a way of respect because the energy and the enthusiasm of students is what keeps me interested in teaching. The way to keep student involvement is some things that I've talked about already. And in terms of school board members becoming involved with what's going on in the school, they need to visit the school. They need to attend all kinds of events. They need to, I think the school board has something called linkage meetings where they meet with individual students in different particular times and come to the students, come to the school, go to the theater, go to the sporting events, really find out what's going on at the schools and talk to the students. And I think that can be really, I think that's what's the most important because that is what the schools are for. They are for students. I thought of another way, just as we were talking, in the times that we're coming to, it might be that students can go back to working and studying in the coffee shops and where I also study and work on my courses. And it might be as a school board member that I can offer a cup of coffee and sit down and have an informal conversation with a student and ask them questions if they're comfortable. So I think that we need some informal ways for students and school board members and the community as a whole to interact. So thanks for your question.
And Traci?
I think what makes me stand out is the unique experience that I can bring as a member of the board, that I have experience with being a dual enrollment teacher. So this year I've taught high school students that are earning college credits in my own courses. I've also had experience developing courses for students who need additional support and a co-requisite support with also developing curriculum that has measurable criteria to meet learning objectives. And I've been involved in initiatives such as M Cubed, which is a collaborative initiative between MPS, MATC, and UWM that focuses on public education. I've also had vigorous online training in Equality Matters, which focuses on effective delivery and collaboration. I've been involved in college-wide projects that created real-time support for over 1,100 instructors during our own COVID-19 online transition, so that teachers felt comfortable getting the support that they needed and had the ability to identify that themselves. I've had experience with bringing together different employee groups that align a 5-year strategic plan with the goals of the college that are student-centered and removing barriers to success, especially for students of color. So there's a broad experience that I can bring to the board that will, it seems that it's lofty and not applicable to the student experience, but will have a high impact as well.
Thank you. And since that was our last question, this concludes the 2021 Student School Board Candidate Forum. Thank you all for coming. And obviously a special thank you for Traci and Ellen for speaking with the students. And have a nice evening.
Thank you. Thank you very much for hosting this.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks to everyone.